Christine Blasey Ford is a 51-year-old professor and research psychologist in Northern California, Palo Alto University. She received multiple degrees and has been widely published in her field. But in 1982, Christine Blasey was just a 15-year-old high school sophomore in Maryland when she attended a party that has now changed her life. According to Professor Ford, Brett Kavanaugh, a 17-year-old high school senior at nearby Georgetown Prep, also attended that party. While his friend watched, she said, Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed on her back and groped her over her clothes, grinding his body against hers and clumsily attempting to pull off her one-piece bathing suit and the clothing she wore over it. When she tried to scream, she said, he put his hand over her mouth. I thought he might inadvertently kill me, said Ford. She said she ran from the room briefly, locked herself in a bathroom, and then fled the house. Professor Ford first spoke about the incident in a couples therapy session with her husband in 2012. The therapist's notes were given to the Washington Post and referenced the incident, saying she was attacked by students from an elitist boys' school who went on to become highly respected and high-ranking members of society in Washington. On the advice of her attorney, Professor Ford took a lie detector test administered by a former FBI agent, according to the Washington Post. The results concluded that Ford was being truthful when she said a statement summarizing her allegations was accurate. Professor Ford's lawyer explained why she was reluctant to come forward with her allegation against Judge Kavanaugh.
No one in their right mind, regardless of their motive, would want to inject themselves into this process and face the kind of annihilation that she will be subjected to by those who want this nominee to go through. This is not a politically motivated action. In fact, she was quite reluctant to come forward, and she was, in fact, outed after she had made the decision not to come forward.
Joining our discussion now, Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor and legal correspondent for Slate.com, and Anna Marie Cox, host of the podcast With Friends Like These. And Dahlia, it is hard. I mean, you're a Supreme Court watcher, close watcher. It is just hard to believe we're here again 27 years later, and that we are going step for step in this repetition of history.
I think I want to push back.
Okay.
Because I think that the theme has become we're just living it over again, what we lived 27 years ago. 27 years ago was all men on that Judiciary Committee panel. 27 years ago, women were mad. They watched that. They watched that footage that Rachel showed of Professor Hill being interrogated about grotesque pornographic detail over and over, and called nutty and slutty, and called a liar, and being compared to The Exorcist. And women voted, right? And we had the micro year of the woman, and suddenly there were 6 women in the Senate in 1992. Now women aren't just mad. Now women have power. And they have Kamala Harris on that Judiciary Committee. They have Amy Klobuchar on that committee. No man is going to do, I don't believe, to Dr. Ford what was done to Anita Hill. And no woman watching it is going to say we don't have power. I think it's just different.
And Kamala Harris may be the best prosecutor who's ever been on that committee. And let's just listen to more of what Deborah Katz, Professor Ford's lawyer, had to say about this.
My question to you is, does she consider this an attempted rape?
She does. She clearly considers this an attempted rape. She believes that if it were not for the severe intoxication of Brett Kavanaugh, she would have been raped.
Anna Marie Cox, your reaction to the attorney's description of this?
Well, it's definitely attempted rape. I don't see it any other way. I want to point out something that is, again, another parallel, but also maybe a point of departure between this and the Clarence Thomas hearings. And that is that in the aftermath of the Anita Hill hearings, reports on sexual harassment in the workplace went up 71%. In the wake of the Me Too movement, the National Sexual Assault Hotline has seen spikes of as much as 25% after each new sort of publicized allegation. And what's going to happen on Monday is that millions of women and men who have been through something like this in their lives are going to have to kind of live through it again. They will be re-traumatized. And I just want to point out that there's help for those people. The National Sexual Assault Hotline is 800-656-HOPE. And I think that those people need to know that they don't have to go through what this woman is going through in order to start to heal. I also want to point out that there is a big difference between what happened with Anita Hill and what happened in this case, because it was children, two children. It was a long time ago, and it should be judged differently. But I think a parallel here is that we need to judge Brett Kavanaugh not just on what he may or may not have done, but how he treats a woman's pain. And that is something I'm going to be paying attention to on Monday. How does he respond to what is happening, whether or not he agrees that this happened with her? Does he take her pain seriously? Do the people interrogating her take her pain seriously? Now, I'll give you a spoiler alert. I don't think Brett Kavanaugh takes women's pain very seriously, and I know that because of the decisions he's made as a judge. But I think that to have that unfold on national television live will be quite instructive.
And Dahlia, we had this sort of contest of letters. Very quickly, suddenly, there was a letter of 65 women, then girls, who Brett Kavanaugh knew in high school, who were coming out in support of him. That letter has been tracked down, and now there's only maybe a half a dozen of them who are formally, publicly in support of him. I have to say, I went to an all-Catholic boys' school like Brett Kavanaugh. I didn't know 65 girls when I was in an all-boys Catholic high school. But then, Professor Ford, her school, graduates of her school, have put out a letter with more than 200 signatures, including Julia Louis-Dreyfus and others. This is all the wind-up for this giant moment that's going to occur on Monday when Professor Ford raises her right hand and we finally hear her story.
You made the point, Lawrence, and it's so important. We have no process. We have no template. We have no burden of proof. We don't know what we're doing. Senator Blumenthal is saying, we don't have findings of facts. We don't have a record. We have one person's allegations. We have another person's denial. There is no machine to input this into. And so I think in lieu of that, you get this reflexive, people line up on their sides. They believe who they want to believe. And it, I think, is incumbent on the Senate to say this is more than just picking teams for Red Rover. This is a lifetime appointment, an Article III appointment to the highest court in the land. And it has to be taken seriously as a fact-finding enterprise and as a reason-based enterprise. And for me, what's terrifying about people lining up and saying, X is a liar, X was just a kid, the process is broken because we found out at the 11th hour, that's all deflecting from the real issue. The real issue is, did this happen? And if it happened, how do we find out and press the factual allegations? And if we find out to our satisfaction, what do we do next? Those should be the questions, not just lining up and pledging fealty based on who you know and who you went to school with.
Anna, what will you be listening for on Monday as you try to decide who's telling the truth here?
Like I said, I think what I'm going to be listening for is whether or not Kavanaugh seems to have grown as a person since whatever happened. I come to this not just as a survivor of sexual assault, but as a person in recovery from drugs and alcohol. And quite frankly, I have done stuff in blackout. I have done things that I would never do sober in a blackout. So I'm prepared to believe that he may have done something terrible that he doesn't remember doing. But it's my practice, and it's the way that I've sort of been taught to conduct myself in recovery, that if someone says I did something terrible and I don't remember whether I did it or not, I'm not in a position to deny it. And what my place is to listen to that person and to hear their pain, to hear their experience, and ask what it is I can do to make it better. To look to something restorative, whether or not I can deny or agree to the allegation. That's not the process we have in the Senate. But it would be an interesting, instructive moment. I also think that one thing I want to point out is that it's likely that more people, women and men, have gone through something like what Dr. Ford went through than what something like Anita Hill went through, which is to say something that happened once that was terrible and that they've never spoken about again. rather than something systematic that had witnesses, that had a whole trail to it, which is what happened with Anita Hill. There are millions of people who had a terrible thing happen to them that they will go to their grave not telling anyone. And what I hope happens in these hearings is that these people are not confirmed in their belief that that's what they have to do, that they learn that there is a way that they can come forward and talk about these things that happen to them. Because until we have full testimony about people's experiences, we're not going to be able to get better as a society.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.